This story is about the Whispering Shadows. It was supposed to be a routine patrol in the heart of the forest, nothing out of the ordinary. But I quickly realized this place was hiding something far more sinister than I could have imagined. It started on a crisp autumn evening when the sun was barely touching the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows through the towering trees. As I walked along the trail, a strange chill gripped my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It was a familiar sensation from past encounters in the woods, but this time, it felt different. I was used to the odd noises that came from the forest, rustling leaves, the occasional owl, and the wind whistling through the branches, but tonight, the sounds were far too deliberate. Something was watching me. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but the rustling grew louder, like footsteps pacing behind me. I turned around quickly, only to see the vast emptiness of the forest. The shadows stretched longer, swallowing up the fading daylight. My flashlight flickered, and as I twisted the handle to tighten the batteries, a voice called out from the distance. "Help!" The voice was faint, barely a whisper, but it was unmistakable. Someone, or something, was in trouble. Without thinking, I sprinted toward the source of the voice, weaving through the dense trees, my boots pounding against the forest floor. The voice grew louder with each step, but there was something off about it. It sounded like a child, but there was an eerie distortion, like it was coming from far beneath the earth itself. Then, without warning, the voice stopped. I found myself standing in a small clearing, the moonlight casting a ghostly glow on the ground. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt an overwhelming presence around me. I turned slowly, scanning the area, but there was no sign of anyone, or anything, nearby. That's when I saw it. A dark figure, standing just on the edge of the clearing. It was humanoid but impossibly tall, its silhouette blending seamlessly with the shadows of the trees. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its gaze on me, piercing through the darkness. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just any forest dweller, it was something far more dangerous. Suddenly, the whisper returned, this time much closer. It was coming from behind me. I spun around, heart racing, only to find nothing but empty air. Panic flooded my veins. I knew then that I wasn't alone, and I hadn't been for a while. As I backed away, my foot caught on a root, sending me sprawling to the ground. The figure in the shadows seemed to grow larger, its form more distinct now. It stepped forward, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark. That's when I heard the whisper again, louder, clearer. "Leave this place, or join us." I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering in my chest. My flashlight was useless now, its beam weak and flickering. I had to get out. But when I turned to run, my legs froze. It felt like something was pulling me back, as if the earth itself had decided to hold me in place. The shadow figure was now mere feet away, its presence suffocating. The whispers became a chorus, echoing all around me. "Help!" It repeated, this time in multiple voices, overlapping, distorted, like an ancient chant. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, and the trees around me began to sway unnaturally, as if they were alive. I could feel the temperature drop rapidly, and my breath came out in white clouds, visible even in the moonlight. The air was thick with something unspoken, something foul. I turned back toward the trail, only to find that the path I had walked was gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of thick trees, their trunks gnarled and twisted like skeletal hands reaching out to grab me. I was trapped. There was no way out. The figure moved closer, its face now visible. It was an empty void, a hollow mask of darkness that consumed the light around it. The whispers turned into a scream, a horrific sound that rattled my bones. In a blind panic, I ran. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to escape. I pushed past the trees, my heart pounding in my ears, the figure still following me, its laughter now filling the air. Every step I took felt heavier, like I was moving through water, the forest closing in around me. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, everything stopped. The forest fell silent. The oppressive air lifted, and I could breathe again. I looked around, but the figure was gone. The trees were still. The whispers had ceased. I collapsed to the ground, trembling, drenched in sweat. Had it been real? Was I losing my mind? But then I remembered the voice, the one that had called for help. I had to report it. I had to warn someone. I stumbled back toward the station, my mind spinning with the horrors I had just witnessed. But when I reached the edge of the forest, I found something that chilled me to my core. The ground was littered with footprints, fresh ones, leading right back into the woods. The same footprints I had seen earlier, but this time, they were mine. They led into the forest, not out. And the worst part? I didn't remember walking back. This story is about the ghost of Hollow Creek. The night I encountered the ghost of Hollow Creek, I knew from the start something wasn't right. It wasn't the usual rustling of leaves or the distant howl of wolves. No, this was different. There was an unnatural silence in the air, a suffocating stillness that weighed heavily on my chest as I walked deeper into the woods. As a forest ranger, I've been trained to handle all kinds of situations: wild animals, hikers lost in the woods, and even the occasional strange sighting. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. It was well after dusk when I decided to check on Hollow Creek, a place known for its eerie reputation. Old-timers in the town nearby would always tell stories about the creek, claiming it was haunted by a ghostly figure, a woman who had drowned there many years ago. Some said she still wandered the woods, her wails echoing through the trees, warning anyone who dared venture near. At first, I didn't put much stock in the stories. But something had drawn me to the creek that night, something I couldn't explain. I arrived at the creek just as the last bit of light faded from the sky. The water, dark and still, reflected the moonlight like a mirror. I stood at the edge for a moment, staring into the depths, feeling an overwhelming sense of unease. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, like a breath carried on the wind, brushing against my ear. "Help me." I froze. My heart began to race as I looked around, but there was nothing in sight. I told myself it was just the wind, my mind playing tricks on me, but then I heard it again, this time clearer. "Help me, please." The voice sounded faint, like it was coming from the water itself. I crouched down at the creek's edge, peering into the inky depths. But nothing. Just the water, eerily still. A chill ran through me, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I stood up quickly, scanning the area, but the woods were empty. Still, the whisper echoed in my mind, like a constant hum. Then, I saw something move in the corner of my eye. A figure, pale, almost translucent, was standing just on the other side of the creek. I couldn't make out any features, but the outline of a woman, draped in a flowing white dress, stood motionless. Her long, dark hair hung down around her face, obscuring her features. She stared at me, but her eyes were hidden in the shadows of her hair. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My body was frozen, as if the fear had paralyzed me. The woman's lips parted, and she spoke again, her voice like a distant echo. "Help me. I can't rest." Suddenly, the air grew colder, the temperature dropping so fast I could see my breath fog in the air. The moonlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the ground. The woman stepped forward, her feet not quite touching the ground, as though she was floating. She glided closer, her gaze fixed on me. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I felt my legs shaking beneath me. "Please, you have to help me." Without thinking, I stepped back, stumbling over a rock. But when I looked back up, the woman was gone. Vanished. I stood there for what felt like hours, my breath heavy in my chest, the only sound being the soft rush of the creek's water. But I knew she was still out there, somewhere, watching. I turned to leave, my heart still racing, when I heard it again. "Help me." I spun around, but the creek was empty. The figure was gone, but the whisper lingered in the air. It was as if the very forest itself was alive with her presence. Without a second thought, I ran back toward the trail, my feet pounding against the ground. I didn't dare look back. But as I neared the edge of the woods, the whisper grew louder, more urgent. I felt like I was being followed, like the very shadows were reaching out to pull me back into the darkness. I ran faster, the sound of my breathing mixing with the rustling of leaves behind me. Then, out of nowhere, a cold hand touched my shoulder. I froze, my heart in my throat. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't want to know. But the voice, now right behind me, whispered one final time. "Help me, and you will never leave." In a blind panic, I pushed myself forward, running as fast as I could, until I reached the edge of the woods and collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. The whisper faded, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I couldn't shake it. The next day, I went back to the creek in daylight. I had to know what happened, had to make sense of the events. But when I arrived, there was nothing. No sign of the woman, no evidence of anything strange, just the creek, calm and ordinary. But the locals told me a different story. They said that anyone who had heard the woman's voice was never seen again. Some had even gone missing, just like I had, only to return days later, forever changed. They couldn't explain it, but they knew one thing for certain: Hollow Creek had a way of trapping souls, and once you heard the voice, you were never truly free. I never went back to that place. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I hear the whisper. And I know it's not just a memory. It's a warning. This story is about the night of the Southern Cannibal. It was supposed to be a routine checkup, just another night shift for a forest ranger like me. But that night, things went terribly wrong. I was assigned to monitor the forest trails near an old, secluded cabin, deep in the woods. Locals had long abandoned the area, claiming that it was cursed, but as a ranger, I'd always brushed off the rumors. People told stories about strange disappearances and sightings of a figure they called the Southern Cannibal, a terrifying entity that lurked in the woods, waiting for its next victim. I didn't believe in ghost stories or urban legends, but this night changed everything. The wind was biting cold as I made my way down the trail, my flashlight illuminating the path. As I passed the old cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. There were no animals in sight, no sounds of birds or insects, just an eerie silence. The kind that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. That's when I heard it. A faint rustling in the bushes behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. No movement, no animals, just the whisper of the wind through the trees. I told myself it was just my nerves, but I couldn't ignore the strange sense of dread creeping up my spine. I moved on, trying to shake the feeling, but then I heard it again, closer this time, like footsteps crunching on the leaves. Turning back, I flashed my light into the trees, but again, there was nothing. I felt a chill run down my spine, and my gut told me something was very wrong. That's when I saw it. A figure standing in the shadows just outside the cabin, its silhouette barely visible. A tall, hunched man, dressed in tattered clothes, staring directly at me with piercing eyes. He didn't move, just watched me with an unsettling stillness. My heart raced as I called out, but the man didn't respond. I cautiously approached, and the closer I got, the more I could make out his features. His skin was pale, almost sickly white, with long, matted hair hanging around his face. His eyes were sunken, dark, and wild, and his mouth, there was something wrong with his mouth. His lips were cracked and covered in something dark, something that didn't look like blood, but like rot. "Help me," he rasped in a voice so hoarse it barely sounded human. They're coming for you." Before I could react, the man collapsed to his knees, his body jerking in spasms. The sight was enough to paralyze me with fear. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Something about this man, about his presence, kept me frozen in place. And then, I heard the growl. Low, guttural, like an animal. A deep sound that vibrated in my chest. I slowly backed away, trying not to make a sound, but the growl grew louder, closer. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, but when I looked back, the man was gone, vanished into the shadows. All that remained was a trail of footprints leading deeper into the woods. I didn't stop to question what had just happened. I ran back to my truck, my breath coming in ragged gasps. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still following me. Later that night, I did some research on the cabin and the southern cannibal legend. I discovered a chilling truth. The man I'd seen wasn't just some hermit, he was part of a dark history. Decades ago, there had been reports of a family that lived in that cabin, known for their strange behavior. Locals believed they practiced cannibalism, and many who had ventured too close to the cabin had disappeared, never to be seen again. Some believed the family was cursed, doomed to haunt the woods for eternity. The worst part? There were rumors that the southern cannibal wasn't a ghost at all, but something far worse, something still alive, still hunting, still waiting for its next victim. And I had barely escaped.